In this video clip, I would like to talk a little bit about business data analytics. Data analytics is probably the main reason that we have data. The concept of having data is to generate information, as we've talked about all semester. Well, the idea of data analytics is how can I take a mass of data? We've talked about big data. We've talked about the Internet of Things, which is creating massive amounts of data. But what do we do with that data? Well, we convert it into information, and that's the purpose of data analytics, to make the data meaningful so that we can make better decisions. So data analytics is critically important, especially to this class. Now, your book talks about online analytical processes. We sometimes refer to that as OLAP, O-L-A-P. OLAP is simply how we take computers online and convert data into meaningful information. The field of data analytics basically is the concept that supports the OLAP idea. Data analytics is how can I take a bunch of data and make something meaningful out of it. In other words, how can I get, with this raw data, how can I get information that's going to be exceedingly valuable for me to be able to run my business? And so that's what this field is all about, data analytics. The first couple of slides that I talk about or give you in the PowerPoint about data analytics talk just simply the basics of what is data analytics. The next, the one slide, the third, I think it's the third slide, talks about why do we have this? Well, it's critical because in order to understand the decisions we have to make, those decisions need to be made in a meaningful manner, are decisions that rest upon taking these data that we've collected and converting them into information that will be useful for making decisions. That's what data analytics is all about. It helps us to understand what is going on, what it looks like, and then what should we do? And this is what we're talking about when we talk about data analytics. Okay. The fourth slide talks about the hierarchy of data use, which I like this slide. I forget exactly where I stole it, but I like this slide because what it does, it talks about at the base, it talks about hindsight. These are the data that we have collected. This is by describing these data, we get a feel for where we've come from and where we are currently. Okay. The next layers or so, you notice that on the left side of the slide, it talks about descriptive analytics, then diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive. And we're going to talk about that in this clip. Okay, hindsight, using historical data, where we've been, but we need this to understand better where we are. That's the insight, what if, and investigate. The next is foresight, looking forward, and that's really one of the critical things about it. The idea of being able to predict the future so that we'll know better what our business should do. So if you look at that slide closely, you'll see that it is critically important that we have good data that is trustworthy, and also that we know how to use those data in a meaningful fashion. The next slide that I've presented for you talks about the transition as we go further and further and further up in terms of data analytics. We typically start with basically understanding where we are. That's descriptive analytics. We'll talk about that. Descriptive analytics is one of the reasons why you have to take a statistics class here, in case you ever wondered. The idea of statistics is being able to take a mass of data and be able to describe what those data look like so you understand what the world looks like better. That's the concept. You're introduced to things like mean, which is the middle point of data, spread, standard deviation, all kinds of useful tools that can be generated. And then you're introduced to the idea of probability, which is how likely is something about to happen. We take those data and then apply that into data analytics so that we start developing a better understanding of what business is, where the business is headed, and what we can anticipate for the future. So this is the idea of good data analytics. This is a critical part of any good business. The next slide talks about big data analytics. In the previous discussion of big data, when I talked about Hadoop, and had you look at some of those videos about Hadoop, we talked about MapReduce. MapReduce is simply a technique where we take, it's a tool that we use, but then once we have the data in a form that we can be used, then there are lots of different tools, as you can see, similarity clustering, dimension reduction, close, that's near and dear to my heart. This is where we take a mass of data and reduce it into a few meaningful dimensions that we can use in terms of decision making. It's a very important concept. So, next slide talks about descriptive analytics. Descriptive analytics simply is looking at a mass of data and telling what the data are. This is where you get the mean, median, mode, standard deviation, range, the various tools that we have in the basic statistics class. The descriptive statistics are critically important because we don't understand what the data are, what they represent, what the information we can glean from those data. The rest of this is not going to happen very well. So descriptive statistics is very important. And one of the areas of descriptive analytics that we've started using lately is this field called visualization, the concept of visualization. The next slide talks about visualization. What it is, basically visualization is so we can, looking at our eyes, take a mass of data, look at it, and understand those data better. What does this represent? What is the information that I can glean simply by taking the data and organizing it in such a fashion, such as bar graphs, pie charts, anything that we can do that will help us in terms of understanding what the data look like. So the next slide gives you a description of what business data and visualization is about. It simply is this: how can I take a mass of data and look at it? And by just simply examining the data from the descriptive point of view, oftentimes we're able to pull from those data trends. We can see things, the old adage about a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, it is. And it's an easy way to get some insight about what data are looking at. The next slide talks about the difference between statistics, basic statistic, descriptive statistics that I've been talking about with the probability, likelihood something's going to happen, and how that we can then take those tools and start to make more sense out of it. And we do, oftentimes this is called data mining, and the idea behind data mining is really pretty simple. Data mining is nothing more than taking applied tools into a set of data and looking into that set of data to either try to find patterns, try to find things that we couldn't see before we looked at these tools. Now keep in mind, we can always use visualization with some of these tools. So I've listed some of the things that we have here, things like cluster factor, discriminant analysis, or advanced statistics, basically what they boil down to. Non-metric multidimensional scaling is a technique that we can use that we can reduce the dimensionality of data. Uh, Dimensionality is very important. And multidimensional simply implies that we look at things in many different forms and formats, and this is very important. Decision trees and supervised, unsupervised data exploration, these are simply just tools. And these are tools that I want you to be aware of. They exist. You don't have to know what they are exactly, how they work. This is for people that want to go into business analytics, which, by the way, is a marvelous job. But one of the most important things that we have here is the idea of predictive analytics. Next slide. Now, when you're talking about prediction, one of my favorite quotations is from the old Yankee catcher general manager, Yogi Berra. Yogi Berra purportedly wants to say, making a prediction is very difficult, especially if it's about the future. Think about it. Yogi had a point, actually. Predictive analysis is very difficult. We need to do it because we need to make our best guess as to what is going to happen. This is very important in terms of business, in terms of the example I have on this slide is in marketing, where we have to be able to understand what our inventory levels are, what the demand for our product will be, etc. These are things, if we don't understand them, we don't know exactly how much to produce, what to produce, when to produce, etc. Very important we be able to predict what will happen in the future. So predictive analysis, and there are all kinds of techniques. And again, on the exams, I'm not going to expect you to know what regression analysis is, not necessarily some of these tools. I'm giving them to you simply so you'll understand. But things like, as you can see, the next slide talks about some of the data mining tasks and tools that we have that help us in terms of making better predictions. Better predictions is critically important. Just remember that. We talk about cluster analysis. Cluster analysis simply looking at a mass of data and trying to determine what kinds of things cause people to cluster together in various things, or doesn't have to be people, it can be any kind of data. What causes them to cluster together? The idea of the market basket analysis is simply looking at data and trying to determine if one person buys something, how likely are they to buy something else? One of my favorite examples is Walmart. If you go into Walmart and you look where the baby supplies are, you don't have to look too far, and you're going to see there's beer displays very close at hand. The Walmart North store out here, if you go into the Walmart North store, what you'll find is that the baby things are toward the back on the east side. As you look at the store from the front, be on the left side. You go about almost to the back of the store, not quite, but pretty close, you'll find the baby supplies. If you look in that aisle right next to it, maybe 15, 20 feet away, you're going to see a beer display. Why? Market basket analysis. Turns out that oftentimes by looking at the data, Walmart discovered that people who buy baby supplies oftentimes buy beer. Now, if you stop and think about it, it makes some sense, because who buys beer? Younger people. Who have babies? Younger people. Mom calls dad at work, that's back in the day when we could be at work, says, honey, we're running low on diapers. Can you stop by Walmart and pick some up? So the young man goes in. On the way back, he sees this beer display. Thinking to himself, it's a weekend, big game's on, hopefully, and I'm out of beer. Better get beer as well as the diapers. It turns out market basket analysis helped them determine that. These are the kinds of things that data analytics can do for us. data analytics can help us the next slide talks about some of the other techniques, the decision trees. There's an example of a decision tree where you can see that if this happens, then what else will happen, then what else might happen from that point. These are things that are very important, that we understand rationale and understand how people go through making various decisions. With data analytics, we can do this. Rule induction, neural networks. Neural nets are one of my favorite things to talk about. A neural net simply is a computer program that tries to emulate the human brain. Does a pretty good job of it sometimes. So anyway, we can train neural nets to recognize patterns in masses of data and have the neural net analyze the data for us, or at least help us to understand it. Notice, keep in mind that none of these techniques do the job. It has to be interpreted by humans, and this is always important to remember. So I have listed some more data mining algorithms. The reason I show all this to you is because I want you to understand there's a mass of techniques that are available to do an awful lot of good data analytics that help us make better decisions. So the components in business data analytics, you can see, is data aggregation, which is making sense of the data, data mining, going through the data to find out sequences, the various kinds of things. Notice I also threw up text mining. Text mining is using textual information. Doesn't all have to be numeric. Used to back in the day, back when I started doing this in the dark ages, we had to, if it wasn't numeric, we couldn't mess with it. Well, now we have the ability to go through textual information and find patterns in the text. So it's a wonderful field to help us get better information, glean better information, not only so that we can predict the future, but we can optimize and have prescriptive analytics. Now, what is prescriptive? Simply telling us what we should be doing. We have tools now that not only help us predict, but also can help us go into and understand how we can best use the resources of the organization. That's the idea of prescriptive analytics, so that we will know what is the best thing for us to do in a given situation. Very important, very, very important. So the idea of prescriptive analytics, going well beyond just descriptive, a step beyond predictive, to tell us what to do. The last slide that I have in the slide set that I've given to you talks about the future of data analytics. I wanted you to see this simply because as we have the technologies that we have today to generate massive quantities of data, big data we talked about, the Internet of Things is an example of the ability that we have to create massive databases. What we can do with these databases now and what we will be able to do with them in the future is simply be able to more and more and more make better decisions. Decisions based not just on gut feel, not just on experience, not that they're bad. Understand, it's very important that you can do this. That's what makes a good manager a good manager. Good experience, the ability to use data and to use information well. That's what will make you successful. This field of data analytics is huge. I want you to read through this slide. I'm gonna test you over this material, so I hope you understand that study it, understand it. And if you have questions, I would love that you email me questions, because I feel handicapped that I can't see you face to face. I do miss being with you. These short blurbs are okay to a point, but it's not as good as it could be if we were able to be together face to face. Stay safe, stay hunkered down,